all the lifestyle areas and our genetics are really at the roots of the tree. And the way we practice in medicine these days is more looking at the leaves and the branches. It doesn't take years to feel better, sometimes just a week or two.
Did you know that your gut health is key in the fight against bone loss? That's right. I'm Monica from AlgaeCal, and today we're diving into this and more with clinical nutritionist and author Dr. Liz Lipski. Dr. Lipski believes that using food as medicine can have profound effects on people, and bone health is no exception. Today, we'll dive into Dr. Lipski's personal experience with AlgaeCal, as she's not only recommending it to her clinician groups, but has seen her own bone density increase while taking AlgaeCal Plus. Stick around, and before we jump in, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to stay updated on all our expert conversations. Hi, Dr. Lipski. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today. I really want to begin our conversation today with you sharing your background and your experience in the field of nutrition. I mean, your experience is vast, your accolades are long, and so my first question for you really is, what inspired you to become a nutritionist in the first place? What's your why?
My why was that when I was in college over 40 years ago, I started being really interested in herbal medicine in the mid 1970s. And in that journey of being really excited about herbal medicine, I also started studying nutrition. When I graduated college, I started teaching classes on herbal medicine. And one night in the middle of a class, it was that light bulb that they always talk about, just came into the middle of my brain and said, as much as I love herbs, they're not foundational. And people need roots. They need the roots of the tree to be really healthy. They need food and friends and a sense of meaning and purpose in their lives, and sleep and movement. And all of these things are really the foundation of health. So I was lucky because I was only 23 years old and realized, this is my purpose. This is my why. And lately, over the last 10 years or so, my why has been, I don't want other people to have to learn nutrition the way I did, which was by myself and figuring it out my own way. And so being able to teach at a university level, teach grad students, and develop doctoral programs so that I can train people to really think about personalized nutrition and learn it in a great way has been my personal mission, because I believe that if we have a good nutritionist or dietitian or nutrition coach in a medical practice or in a community, that they begin to change the way medicine's practiced. And it's profound. I remember one of the first practices I was ever in, I started recommending certain supplements, and the doctor was like, whoa, this is amazing how well these work. We should write this up for a journal. And I'm like, me? I don't know how to do that. But, again, it's like, I think that we really change the conversation, because most of medicine, if we think about health as a tree, all the lifestyle areas and our genetics are really at the roots of the tree. And the way we practice in medicine these days is more looking at the leaves and the branches. But if we don't have good roots to help the tree stand up, then it's not going to work out well. And in Canada and in the United States, people are eating pretty poorly, even though when you ask somebody, tell me about your diet, they'll say, it's pretty good. But then when I look at it, it's really not very good.
Sounds like me a little bit when I say that to my nutritionist, but thank you for sharing that. And I think the visual of the tree and the leaves makes so much sense, and it's a perfect jumping off point for the conversation and how that relates to bone health. Definitely a lot of similarities there. So, we go back a few years now, like our relationship and even prior. And so for those that aren't aware, like, how did you first hear about AlgaeCal?
I first heard about AlgaeCal from Lara Pizzorno. And Lara was raving about the changes in her bone health. And that got me very interested. And then I was at a conference, and I think there was an AlgaeCal booth. So I first purchased some AlgaeCal because I wanted to know more about it so that I could tell other people with poor bone density about it.
And now you've been on AlgaeCal for a couple of years. Can you maybe share your personal experience with AlgaeCal and how that's been?
Yeah. So first of all, I really like the product. I take it every night. I take usually 4 of the AlgaeCal Plus, and I find it really easy to digest, and I've never had any kind of issues with it in any way. Sometimes calcium can make people's stomach queasy, and this is just kind of feels very balanced and very mellow, and like my body really likes it. So that was the first thing. And I think I've been taking it a little over, well, almost 2.5 years now. And I had a bone density done in 1921 in January. And I think I started taking the AlgaeCal around June that year. And at that time, I was showing kind of normal hip bone density, but I had some loss in my spine, so was osteopenia. And when I just had my levels done again, my hips were again perfectly great, and my bone density in my spine had gone up 0.9% a year. And some of that time I wasn't even on the AlgaeCal. So I was really excited because it had gone up 2.4%.
That's so exciting. I remember when you sent me that email, I think it was maybe towards the end of the summer, and I was like, oh, this is so great. And like you said, you were just on the AlgaeCal Plus, which is fantastic. And I know you also take our triple power omega-3 fish oil. And so for bone health, AlgaeCal, what do you think AlgaeCal represents for you and your experience?
So for me, in my experience, it feels like something that I want to continue taking lifelong. For me also, I love the origins of where it comes from, that the algae is dead and it washes up on the beaches and then it gets harvested and processed. And I really love that nothing is harmed. This is a waste product that's recycled, and it feels that gentle. And I also know that there are so many beautiful things that come from the ocean. Originally we came from the ocean. And so it's like meets like, which is why it feels so good to be taking AlgaeCal. It feels like it's something my body's familiar with.
Thank you for sharing. And it's such a great point. You know, it's sustainably hand harvested. We never dredge into the oceans. We're never disturbing the environment. And so we appreciate that for sure. And then, of course, like you said, like knows like. It's a lot easier to digest, a plant source than something that's traditionally rock based, for example, with calcium carbonate and calcium citrate. So for others, in your opinion, if they come across AlgaeCal, what could it represent for others? What do you think when people, see AlgaeCal or the stories online? What do you think it could mean for them?
The 7-year study showed increases in bone density every single year. And as people age, what we find is that there's a loss of bone mineralization. AlgaeCal gives me hope, especially if somebody has osteoporosis, along with the strontium boost, along with the fish oil and the new vitamin D, which has this harmony of all the fat soluble nutrients, vitamin K, E, D, and E. So often we think about bone health and we think about calcium and vitamin D, and we just kind of stop there. But there's at least 20 nutrients that are necessary to help us make bone. And when we're really well nourished, it's easy for the body to make bone because it knows how to do it and it wants to do it. And so just the AlgaeCal Plus works for me with some fish oil. But there are other people who've really got severe bone loss. And for those people, they might need the quartet of products to really feel great and see fantastic improvement.
a personalized approach to health is what you kind of just gave an example of. And I think it's a perfect segue into gut health and the bone health connection. And I mean, gut health and bone health, they're interconnected in ways that may not be immediately obvious, but understanding their importance together is crucial for overall well-being. So Dr. Lipski, what is the connection between gut health and bone health? How do they influence each other?
So first of all, somewhere around 60% of North Americans have some kind of GI issue. They have irritable bowel syndrome, or they have GERD, which can look like heartburn, or it can be silent, so they don't really feel it. People have indigestion. People have eosinophilic esophagitis. People have inflammatory bowel disease. People have cancers anywhere from their mouth all the way through to their rectum. And, the purpose of digestion is to get nutrients to every single cell in the body. And bone is a tissue and it needs nutrients. It needs a lot of nutrients. It needs protein and phosphorus and calcium and vitamin D and magnesium and zinc and fish oil. And, it needs, and B vitamins and all those fat soluble vitamins. It needs all of those things. And so if digestion is compromised and somebody isn't able to eat the right foods and supplements, then be able to digest those really well, which we have a lot of people who either don't have sufficient gastric acid in their stomach, which makes digestion of protein very difficult. It also makes absorption of calcium and iron and magnesium and zinc and other minerals difficult, because we need that high acid in the stomach as it goes into the small intestine to be able to absorb minerals. And if we don't have that, we're not going to be able to absorb the minerals that we need for our bone or the protein that we need to create new bone. And so that's really basic. And then what we also see is that when we have inflammation in the gut, that leads to systemic inflammation, and that also hinders the building of new bone tissue. In the gut, we make neurotransmitters, and one of the neurotransmitters that we make, 90% of, that people have probably heard of, is serotonin. And serotonin is one of the neurotransmitters that help us feel calm and easy about life, and which is why we've got so many antidepressants that are based on serotonin. And so when we look at that, and we also make dopamine in the microbiome, which is one of these other happy micronutrients, and GABA, and all of these are synthesized by the microbiome. And so if the microbiome is out of balance, we're not going to get this synthesis. And what we know is that it's very interesting is that the serotonin that's made in the gut plays a different role in bone formation than the serotonin that's in the brain. And they both contribute to stimulating the production of osteoblasts to make more bone, which is so interesting because you don't really think about all of that. When I was in school, I learned that our genes were set in stone. But the honest truth is that in every cell, you and I have genes from our mother and our father. And in every cell, maybe the color of your eyes is represented in by both of those, but it gets controlled in your eyes differently than in your liver, what's expressed. And so why isn't an eye just like a liver? Because we're always suppressing some of those genes and expressing others. And what we've learned is that the foods we eat, our emotions every day, our exercise, our sleep, our friendships, our relationships, when we're feeling love, different genes get expressed than when we're feeling anger or sadness. When we go out for a walk and we're basking in the fall and we're basking in nature, or the snow or the summer or whatever we're basking in, our body starts regulating. Our genetic information is like, it opens up, which is how we feel. And, and food does the same thing. So when we're eating real foods or when we're taking AlgaeCal, which is it found in nature naturally, then the body gets different information than when we're eating highly processed foods. All of that really regulates whether we're happy or sad, or whether we're fat or thin, or how well we sleep, or pretty much anything else in our overall health. And so feeding our gut feeds our bones, which also feeds our microbiome, which keeps us happy or not, depending on what we're doing.
I mean, it's so fascinating. I can hear you talk and talk about all this all day long, and you're such a wealth of information. So where do prebiotics and probiotics come in then? Like, what are they? What do they do? How does it all relate?
Prebiotics to me are the real magic. And the reason is that prebiotics are food for the gut microbiome. And so the actual definition is a prebiotic is a substrate that's selectively utilized by microorganisms conferring a health benefit. So that means that they've actually researched these different various prebiotics to say, this prebiotic, inulin, for example, confers this health benefit. So it's a very kind of a rigid definition there. But where we find them is we find them in soluble fibers. And we also find some in, fiber in food is not something that humans can digest very well, but the microbiome can digest the soluble fibers and use them for food. And so that's of huge benefit because that helps us produce something called short chain fatty acids. And I know this is like biochemistry, but these are fats that are small and our body uses those for energy. So for example, we use butyric acid is one of the main ones, and we use that to modulate gene expression. But the main thing we use it for is that our brain and our muscles run on glucose, but our digestive system doesn't. The small intestine runs on an amino acid called glutamine, and the large intestine uses butyrate to get 70% of its energy. And so it uses it to make new cells, to feed the cells that are there, and to do repair work. And so if it's not there, then it doesn't work right. And then we also make short chain fatty acids. We make propionic acid. I'm just kind of looking. It's taken up through the liver. All of these are anti-inflammatory. They help modulate the immune system. They help regulate cholesterol synthesis and keep it even so that if cholesterol's high, they can help bring it down. And then we also have acetate, which works throughout the body and brain. And so we've got all these short chain fatty acids. So this morning and yesterday, I was looking how does this actually relate to bone health specifically? And so I found a paper that was published in Nature Communications. And what they said is these short chain fatty acids regulate osteoclast metabolism and bone mass, and that they have protective effects in women who are postmenopausal and with inflammation-induced bone loss. So yeah, they have all these great effects throughout the body, but they also have all these great effects on bone. And those are just really, we're at the surface of really looking at how these prebiotics help regulate bone. And then probiotics are really specific microbes that have specific effects on health. So for example, we know lactobacilli in acidophilus and reuteri and other strains of lactobacilli really affect things like irritable bowel syndrome and traveler's diarrhea and can be regulators of inflammation and have so many benefits. Even Lactobacillus reuteri, it's been shown to like help with anxiety. So we've got probiotics that are specifically being looked at. They're called psychobiotics. How do they help regulate depression and anxiety and other mental health conditions? There are dozens of microbes that we find in something like kefir, or for example, in kimchi or sauerkraut, we find Lactobacillus plantarum, which is very soothing to the body. It's very anti-inflammatory. Plus, we find, again, dozens more probiotic like bacteria that we don't find in supplements. So I think it's really important to also eat probiotic and prebiotic rich foods and cultured and fermented foods so that we can get this more naturally.
And like you said, it sounds like a balanced approach where maybe you're supplementing for a certain condition, but you're also taking in these foods to fill in the gaps, as you would say. And so I guess I'm just curious, the follow-up question with that would be, why has a supplement not been created to include some of those things that are in kefir and kimchi? Is it just not possible yet, or?
So many of the microbes that are in our guts are anaerobes. And so because they die when they're exposed to oxygen, it's hard to manufacture them. However, I think nobody's just done it yet. And it was one of the things I was really thinking about in terms of product, possibly new products. It's like, why don't we have any of these yet? In the research and also the supplement companies, they're starting to make probiotics for very specific health conditions. So let's say that you're someone who has recurring bladder infections. So now the research shows, well, certain microbes really help with bladder health. And so if we combine that with something like D-mannose plus um, plus cranberry extract, then we've got a probiotic product that's kind of a complex that really helps people who have chronic bladder infections. And so we're starting to see some that help regulate blood sugar levels and insulin regulation. We're starting to see various ones. But again, the research is so early. Most of it's been done in mice, and then there's been some done in chicken. And then there's some that have been done in pigs, but we're just starting to see the very beginnings of this clinical research. And I think we're going to see so much more of it. And that, within a handful of years or less, we're going to start seeing more and more probiotics that are beneficial and products that really are coming out devoted to bone health. And maybe AlgaeCal will be one of the leaders in that.
Maybe. It's really exciting, and I think speaks to the shift in medical care, nutrition, even supplementation, where you speak to, a bio-individual approach to health. Everyone is so different. And so to really zone in and be specific about what someone needs, that's going to support their health journey instead of, like a general supplement. And so it sounds like with probiotics, prebiotics, there's so many strains. And so it's really exciting. And I'm looking forward to seeing, over the next couple of years, what comes out. So, I think we could talk about this forever and ever, and you're such a wealth of information, but I want to do something a bit more fun, like a rapid fire Q&A. So I'm just going to shoot you some quick questions, and let's see what you got, Dr. Lipski. Okay, so in your opinion, best foods for gut health?
Cultured and fermented foods, and fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds, beans, and whole grains. And with a caveat, it depends. Okay. So if you're basically healthy and your gut health is pretty good, then all those foods are going to feel really great to you. And if you're somebody who has ulcerative colitis or irritable bowel syndrome or small intestinal bacterial overgrowth or small intestinal fungal overgrowth or methanogen overgrowth, if you're somebody whose microbiome is not right and you have leaky gut, then then what's going to happen is that you might actually need to restrict a bunch of those foods for a little while till you figure out what's causing the inflammation. And so we have a bunch of diets that we use. I think for me, the perfect diet for everybody is probably a whole foods Mediterranean type diet, but then there's going to be some people who can't have gluten containing foods in that. And there are going to be other people who don't do well with dairy products. And there's going to be some others who don't do well with cheese. One of my favorites is like hummus and carrots and peas and, just easy things. But, again, more plant foods, more cultures and fermented foods.
Okay, thank you. Signs of an unhealthy gut.
When it's not working well, it tells us, I don't like something you're doing, right? And so how many of us have had diarrhea or constipation? All of us, right? How many of us have eaten something and had horrible gas pains from it? All of us. How many of us have vomited? How many of us have experienced heartburn or nausea? All of these things are the body signs that it's not happy, but also we don't really think about it. If you have eczema or you have psoriasis or you have skin conditions or even acne, often that starts in the gut. If you have an autoimmune condition, that got triggered by something that was off in your gut.
Probiotic rich foods, what are your favorites? 2 or 3?
So I love making kefir. I have some cashew coconut kefir on the kitchen counter right now brewing. I like kombucha. I make kimchi. Sometimes I'll make sauerkraut, but less often. So those are my favorite.
All right.
Yeah.
And one final question, Dr. Lipski. Can you predict any future trends in prebiotics and probiotics? What do you see in the future as it relates to bone health?
Well, as I said, I think we're going to start seeing more research on specific probiotics in people who have osteoporosis. And I'm looking forward to seeing what other strains we find other than this one Lactobacilli reuteri. Will other lactobacilli do that? Are there bifidobacteria that are going to have the same role? So I'm really looking forward to seeing research that helps us to formulate better products. And then in terms of prebiotics, we're starting to see a lot of marketed, superfoods that are really colorful and have dozens of different kinds of foods in them. And it's that variety that feeds the microbiome in different ways. So I'm really excited about the different trends. And I'm also excited about people just learning about how food is information. And when we put the right information into our bodies, then we get the right results, which is that we feel better.
Dr. Lipski, thank you so much for joining us today. We've covered a lot and we've learned how maintaining a healthy gut is not only crucial for effective nutrient absorption, but also for managing inflammation, supporting overall bone health. We hope this discussion has provided valuable insights for those watching and listening. So thank you again.
Thanks for having me. It's been my pleasure.